Rain fell in a heavy rhythm over the city streets, drumming on rooftops and sliding down windows like silver rivers. In the glow of streetlights, puddles reflected the night in fractured patterns, and every shadow seemed to move with a life of its own. Isla pulled her coat tighter around herself and moved faster, her boots splashing in the shallow water. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away from him, her ex. Just the thought of him made her chest tighten. He was relentless, a shadow in her life she could never seem to shake. Each step she took was a quiet prayer that he wasn't following. Her heart pounded, not just from running, but from fear. Every corner could hide him. Every face in the crowd could belong to him. When she saw the small restaurant ahead, warm light spilling onto the wet street, she didn't hesitate. She slipped inside, letting the door click quietly behind her. The air was fragrant with spices and candles, and the soft murmur of conversation immediately made her feel less alone. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. The restaurant was elegant, but in a quiet way. Velvet curtains framed the windows. Dark wood tables gleamed under the light of golden lamps, and the air smelled faintly of roasted meat and baked bread. She walked to the far corner, hoping no one would notice her. A table near the wall seemed empty, and she slid into the seat, her hands clutching her coat like a shield. Isla didn't notice the man at the table across from hers at first. He was sitting alone, tall and imposing, his posture perfect, his dark hair slicked back. There was something about him that made the air around him feel heavier. People didn't approach him easily, and those who did seemed uneasy. But he wasn't looking at anyone else. His eyes were on her. Lucien. The name was whispered in fear and awe throughout the city. A man who controlled a vast empire, whose reputation made even the bravest hesitate. And yet, there was something about her, sitting quietly at the corner, soaked and trembling, that drew his attention. Something different. Isla felt it too, a sense of being watched, but she didn't turn. She couldn't. Her fear was still too raw. Every nerve in her body screamed that she needed to hide, to be invisible. Minutes passed, or maybe it was only seconds. Time felt stretched, measured by the pounding of her heart and the slow drip of rain outside. Then the door opened again, and she froze. A figure stepped in, scanning the room. Her breath caught. It was him, her ex. She didn't know how he had found her, didn't understand how he seemed to appear wherever she went. His eyes searched the tables, slow and deliberate, until they locked onto hers. Panic surged through her. Isla turned slightly, pressing herself against the wall, hoping the shadows would hide her. But there was no escape. And then, almost instinctively, a presence filled the space beside her. Silent, but commanding. Lucien had stood, his movements smooth, almost predatory, yet there was a calmness to him that made Isla feel both safer and more afraid at the same time. His eyes, dark and unreadable, met hers for a brief moment before moving toward the intruder, her ex. Her ex froze as well. He had clearly recognized Lucien immediately, and in that recognition, fear replaced whatever confidence he thought he had. Lucien didn't speak. He didn't need to. The room seemed to shrink, the weight of his presence pressing down like a physical force. "Leave," Lucien said finally, his voice low, controlled, and full of authority. Her ex stumbled backward, words failing him, and then, without another glance, he turned and fled into the rain. The restaurant door closed behind him with a soft thud. Isla sat frozen for a long moment, unable to speak. Her pulse was still racing, but it was a different kind of fear now. One that was tempered by awe and confusion. She looked up at Lucien. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lucien's gaze softened for the briefest moment, and then he nodded, returning to his seat across from her. He didn't speak again, but his attention remained fixed on her, careful, measured, as if trying to understand something deeper that she hadn't yet revealed. Isla hesitated. She wanted to leave, to run, to escape the tension, but something kept her rooted to the spot. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the strange pull she felt toward him, this man who seemed both terrifying and protective. The waiter approached, and Lucien ordered a drink for her without asking. She looked at him, surprised. He simply raised an eyebrow, as if to say it was already decided. She didn't argue. She couldn't. She felt an odd sense of safety in his presence, though she didn't fully understand why. She tried to calm herself by observing the restaurant. Other patrons chatted quietly, the soft clinking of silverware filling the spaces between words. The rain outside continued, a steady rhythm that matched the uneasy beating of her heart. And across the table, Lucien watched, silent and patient, as if guarding something precious. Finally, Isla spoke, her voice steadier now. Why? Why did you help me? Lucien's eyes flickered, and he leaned back slightly in his chair, considering. You were in danger, he said simply, and you did not belong there. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. There was no room for argument. But you don't even know me, she said. Perhaps, he replied, his gaze never leaving hers. But I know when someone is in trouble. Isla felt heat rise to her cheeks. There was something about the way he spoke, so certain, so commanding, that made her feel both small and noticed at the same time. She realized she didn't want to leave, not yet. She didn't know why, but there was a pull, magnetic and strange, that made her stay. For a few moments, they simply sat there in silence. The city seemed distant, as if the walls of the restaurant had created a small world of its own, where danger and desire hovered in equal measure. Then a shadow moved across the entrance, and both of them looked up. A man in a long coat stepped inside, scanning the room. He paused for a moment, then turned and left, disappearing back into the night. But it was enough. Isla's pulse quickened again. She realized that danger might not be gone, only delayed. Lucien's eyes softened. You cannot stay hidden forever, he said quietly. But for tonight, you are safe. Isla nodded, unable to find words. She felt a strange mixture of relief and tension. She wanted to ask more, to understand him, to understand herself, but she didn't. For now, it was enough that she could breathe, that the immediate threat had passed, and that someone, for once, was watching her back. The rain outside began to lighten, but the storm in her mind continued. She realized something unsettling and thrilling at the same time. She didn't just want to be safe. She wanted to stay. She wanted to know this man who seemed as dangerous as he was, protective. And Lucien, for his part, continued to watch her, silent and unreadable, his mind turning over possibilities, questions, and warnings. He did not yet know why this woman, who had stumbled into his private world by accident, stirred something inside him he had thought long buried. But he felt it, unmistakably. As the night stretched on, the two of them remained there, separated by a table but bound by an invisible thread, the quiet hum of the restaurant around them. Outside, the city slept under the rain, but inside, a storm of another kind had begun, a storm of danger, curiosity, and a strange, undeniable pull between two people who had no idea how much their lives were about to change. The moment was fragile, like glass balanced on a knife's edge, and both of them knew, without speaking, that the next choice could change everything. A soft knock at the door made them both glance up. Isla's stomach dropped. She didn't know who it would be this time, but Lucien's hand, resting subtly under the table, hinted at readiness, a promise that no harm would come to her while he was near. And just like that, The ordinary night became something extraordinary, full of shadows, secrets, and the beginning of a connection that neither of them could yet name. But both would feel for the rest of their lives. The rain continued to fall. But inside that quiet restaurant, a story had begun. A story of danger, of longing, and of two lives drawn together by fate and by shadow. The soft knock at the restaurant door had been brief, but it lingered in Isla's mind. She didn't know if it was a warning or just another passerby. But the pulse of tension had not left her since her ex had fled. Lucien, calm as always, rose from his chair and moved toward the entrance with silent grace. His coat swung behind him like a shadow, and his presence seemed to command the very air around him. "Stay here," he said softly, without looking back. His voice carried authority, but also a strange warmth. Isla nodded, heart still racing, unsure if she wanted to follow or hide under the table. She remained seated, eyes wide, watching as he opened the door. A man stood there, drenched from the rain, shivering slightly. Lucien's expression hardened. Without a word, the man turned and walked away quickly, disappearing into the night. Lucien shut the door and returned to Isla's side. "You see," he said quietly, "the city is full of shadows. Some shadows follow you no matter how fast you run." Isla swallowed hard, feeling both fear and curiosity. "Why do you care about me?" she asked, unable to hold the question any longer. Lucien's eyes softened, a shadow of something unspoken crossing his face. "Because," he said slowly, "sometimes the people we notice are the ones we should protect, even when they do not ask for it." Isla wanted to argue, to protest that she didn't need protecting. But the truth was, she did. Not from Lucien, she could sense that he was not a threat, but from the world that had hunted her so relentlessly. From him, her ex, from every shadow that might creep up behind her. The waiter returned with her drink, and Isla took it with trembling hands. The warmth of the cup seeped into her fingers, calming her slightly. Across the table, Lucien watched her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. He didn't speak, but the silence was not empty. It was filled with something unspoken, something neither of them fully understood yet. After a long moment, Lucien leaned back in his chair. "You cannot remain hidden forever," he said quietly. "You must decide whether to face the world or continue running. But if you choose to face it, I can help." Isla felt a shiver run through her. The idea of trust was foreign to her. People had let her down before, betrayed her, used her. And yet, here was a man whose presence made her feel strangely safe, even though she barely knew him. I don't know if I can trust anyone," she admitted. Lucien nodded slightly. "Trust is earned," he said. "But sometimes, it begins with a choice. And sometimes, it begins with someone noticing you when no one else does." The words hung in the air. Isla looked into his eyes and saw a depth she couldn't name: pain, power, solitude. There was something broken inside him. Something that made him human despite the empire he controlled. She wondered, for the first time, if even a man like Lucien could feel loneliness. "Will you come with me?" he asked suddenly. His tone was gentle but firm. "Not as a prisoner, not as someone who must obey, but as someone who can choose to stand beside me." Isla hesitated. Every instinct in her screamed to run, to hide, to remain invisible. But another part of her, the part that had felt alone and hunted for too long, wanted to take the chance, to see where this path might lead. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. Lucien's lips curved into the briefest hint of a smile. Without another word, he rose, and they left the restaurant together, stepping into the rain-soaked night. The city streets were quiet, but alive with possibility. Isla followed closely, her hand brushing the folds of his coat as they walked. The contact was small, almost accidental, but it made her heart flutter. Lucien led her through narrow alleyways and quiet squares until they arrived at his mansion. A towering structure that seemed carved from shadows and light. The walls were high, the gates ornate, and the air around it hummed with a sense of controlled power. It was a place where rules were made and broken in equal measure. Inside, the mansion was even more extraordinary. Dark wood panels lined the walls, chandeliers hung like frozen flames, and the scent of incense and aged books filled the air. It was both beautiful and intimidating, a perfect reflection of its owner. Lucien guided Isla to a room that overlooked the city. "You can rest here," he said. "Tonight, at least. You are safe." Isla looked around, taking in the room's elegance. There was a bed with soft sheets, a desk stacked with papers, and a fireplace that glowed warmly against the dark walls. She felt a mixture of awe and intimidation. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Lucien nodded. "It is a sanctuary," he said. "But remember, even the safest places cannot protect you from every shadow. Some battles must be faced outside these walls." Isla's gaze fell to the floor. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "I've spent so long running. I don't know if I can stop." Lucien moved closer, his presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting. "Stopping does not mean giving up," he said. "It means finding the courage to face what you fear most." For a long moment, they simply stood there, the firelight casting flickering shadows across their faces. Isla felt a strange pull toward him, a mixture of fear and fascination. She didn't understand it, and she didn't try to. She only felt the warmth, the safety, and the intensity of the man beside her. The night passed slowly, with moments of quiet conversation, punctuated by long silences that spoke more than words ever could. Lucien shared fragments of his world stories of power, responsibility, and shadows he could not escape. Isla shared fragments of her own story, careful not to reveal everything. There was trust forming, fragile and tentative, like glass balanced on a knife's edge. As the early hours approached, a sudden noise from outside the mansion startled them both. A soft crash, followed by the faintest whisper of movement. Lucien's expression hardened instantly. "Stay here," he said, his voice low, commanding. Isla nodded, heart pounding, as he moved toward the source of the noise. She watched from the window as he disappeared into the shadows of the mansion's exterior. She couldn't see what he faced, but she could sense the danger, the intensity, and the precision with which he moved. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, he returned, calm and unshaken. "It was nothing," he said, though Isla could see the tension in his eyes. "A stray intruder, curious about the mansion. They will not return." Isla wanted to ask more, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, her mind racing with thoughts of the man before her, dangerous, powerful, mysterious, and yet undeniably human. "You don't need to be afraid," Lucien said softly, as if reading her mind. "Not here. Not tonight." Isla felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief and something else she didn't fully understand. She wanted to stay, to learn more, to understand this man who had entered her life like a storm and yet offered safety in its eye. They sat together for a while longer, sharing silence and small conversation. Outside, the city slept under the rain. Inside, two lives were quietly intertwining, bound by circumstance, curiosity, and the fragile beginnings of trust. But danger was never far. The shadows that haunted the city were patient, and the enemies of Lucien were many. Isla realized, with a shiver, that her safety here was temporary, fragile, dependent on a man she barely knew but could not stop thinking about. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Lucien stood and moved to the desk, opening a drawer and taking out a small, intricately carved box. He turned to Isla, holding it carefully. "There are things in this world," he said quietly, "that cannot be explained easily. And sometimes, the people we meet are drawn to us for reasons we do not understand. This is part of that." Isla took the box, feeling the weight of it in her hands. It was heavy, not just in physical weight, but with meaning she could not yet grasp. She looked up at him, but he only gave a small nod, a silent promise that this was only the beginning. And in that moment, Isla understood something important. She could not go back to the life she had before, not truly. She had been pulled into a world of shadows, of power, and of danger. And she had no choice but to walk forward, beside the man who had saved her, beside the man who both terrified and intrigued her, beside the man who was more than he seemed. The rain had stopped, but the storm was far from over, and as Isla closed the box carefully and looked out at the city below, she realized that her life and her heart had already begun to change. The city was quiet beneath the morning sun, but in Lucien's mansion, tension hummed like a living thing. Isla had not slept well. The box he had given her the night before lay on the desk beside her, its weight heavy with mystery. She didn't know what was inside, or why it mattered, but she could feel its importance. Lucien moved through the mansion with ease, each step measured, each glance alert. To an outsider, he might have seemed calm, almost serene. But Isla had learned to notice the small details. The tightening of his jaw, the sharpening of his eyes whenever a shadow passed. Danger was never far, and he was always prepared. "Are you ready?" Lucien asked suddenly, his voice calm but carrying an edge of urgency. Isla nodded, though her heart raced. "Ready for what?" He looked at her for a long moment, studying her face. "To face the world," he said finally. "To face those who believe they can harm you or me because they think we are weak. You have been running for too long. It is time to stand." Isla swallowed, her hands tightening around the edges of the desk. She had spent so long hiding, fearing every step, every shadow. And yet, something in Lucien's presence gave her courage she didn't know she had. She stood, taking a deep breath. "Then, I'm ready," she said. Lucien's eyes softened, and for the first time, Isla saw a flicker of something human in him, a vulnerability beneath the mask of power. "Good," he said, "because danger does not wait for anyone." They moved through the mansion, stepping carefully past hallways lined with shadows. Lucien's hand hovered near the hilt of a concealed weapon, and Isla felt a strange mix of fear and admiration. He was dangerous, yes, but protective in a way that made her feel safe. Outside, the city was stirring. Merchants set up their stalls, horses clattered along the cobblestones, and the wind carried the scent of rain and smoke. Isla could see the world in a way she hadn't in months, bright, alive, and dangerous, all at once. Lucien led her to a carriage waiting at the gate. It was black, sleek, and silent, a shadow among shadows. He opened the door for her, his gaze meeting hers. "You stay close," he instructed. "Do exactly as I say." Isla nodded, though she felt the thrill of fear and excitement mix inside her. For the first time, she understood what it meant to trust someone completely, even when danger surrounded them. The carriage moved swiftly through the city, silent wheels gliding over wet streets. Lucien gave her no explanation, only directions. Watch, observe, be ready. Isla's senses sharpened as they approached the outskirts, the city giving way to narrow alleys and abandoned buildings. Then, a group of men appeared, emerging from the shadows like predators. They were armed, their faces masked with arrogance and intent. Isla's stomach dropped, but Lucien's calm presence grounded her. "They think they can harm us," he said quietly. "They are wrong." The men advanced, but Lucien did not panic. He moved with precision, His hand gestures silent commands to guards, who appeared from hidden positions. Isla realized that this world, the world he inhabited, was one of constant danger, where every move was calculated and every shadow could hide an enemy. The leader of the group stepped forward, arrogance in his stance. "Lucien," he said, voice sharp, "you cannot hide forever. You cannot protect her forever." Lucien's gaze was cold, cutting through the words like steel. "You are mistaken," he said calmly. The men hesitated, unsure how to respond to a man who seemed untouchable, whose presence commanded fear without violence. And then, as if by unspoken signal, they retreated, melting into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. Isla's chest heaved, adrenaline still racing through her veins. She looked at Lucien. Awe and something else. Admiration. Trust. Something close to fascination shining in her eyes. You saved us," she said softly. Lucien nodded, but there was no boast in his eyes. "I told you," he said quietly. "Danger never waits. But courage can change the outcome." They returned to the mansion, and Isla placed the carved box back on the desk. Lucien watched her, his gaze unreadable. "You must open it," he said. "You need to understand what it holds. Only then can you see what is real and what is possible." Isla hesitated. The box was beautiful, crafted with care and mystery, almost alive in her hands. She lifted the lid slowly. Inside, she found papers, maps, and a small medallion items that spoke of a past she could barely imagine. Lucien's empire, his influence, and his secrets were laid bare before her. "This is your world now," Lucien said softly, "and you must decide if you will stand with it or walk away." Isla studied the contents, understanding for the first time the depth of his life, the danger, and the responsibility he carried. And yet, she also understood something else. He was not just power and danger. He was human, flawed, capable of fear and hope, and capable of letting someone in. "Then I stay," she said finally, voice steady. "I choose to stand with you." Lucien's eyes softened, a shadow of relief crossing his features. "Good," he said, "because the world does not forgive weakness. And I do not forgive betrayal." They spent the next hours planning, studying the maps and notes. Isla realized she was not just learning about him, she was learning about herself. The courage she had hidden for so long was returning, slowly, like a flame in the darkness. And she knew, deep inside, that she could face whatever came next, not alone, but with him. As night fell again, the mansion glowed with candlelight and the quiet hum of preparation. The danger had not vanished, but it had shifted. Now, it was something they could meet together. Now it was something they could confront, side by side. Lucien turned to her, his gaze intense. "Tomorrow," he said, "we face them all. But tonight you rest. You must be ready. The world outside these walls will test you in ways you cannot imagine." Isla nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the firelight flickering across their faces. In that quiet, Isla realized something important. She no longer felt like a victim. She no longer felt small or powerless. She was part of something larger, something dangerous, yes, but also filled with possibility. And she knew, for the first time in a long while, that she was not alone. Lucien moved closer, his hand brushing hers lightly, a gesture of trust, of connection, of promise. Isla did not pull away. She let the contact linger, understanding that this was more than comfort. It was acknowledgement. It was the beginning of something that could survive even the darkest shadows. And then, as they prepared to leave the mansion the next morning, a messenger arrived urgent, out of breath, with a single word. "They're coming." Isla's heart leapt. Danger had returned, but she no longer trembled with fear, alone. Lucien stood beside her, calm, prepared, unwavering. And in that moment, she realized something deeper. They were stronger, together. The city waited outside, full of threats and secrets, but also full of life. Isla took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what she had chosen and the strength she had discovered. She looked at Lucien, and for the first time, she saw not just a man, but a partner, an ally, and perhaps something more. Someone who could walk beside her through the shadows, through the danger, and into the light. The storm had passed, but the night was still alive with possibility. And together, they stepped into it, ready for whatever came next, bound by trust, courage, and the quiet beginnings of love that had grown in the darkness. And though danger lurked and enemies waited in the shadows, one truth remained clear. Isla was no longer running. She was standing. And beside her, Lucien was ready to face the world and whatever came with it.